Sam the Coward. In a vast southern land crossed by the Great Nile lived a king who had only one son, named Sam. From the moment he learned to walk, Sam showed signs of fear in the face of everything, and as he grew, his timidity only increased. At first, his father's friends joked about it among themselves. It is strange to see a boy of our race run and hide in a hut at the trumpeting of an elephant, or tremble when a lion cub half his size approaches. But after all, he's only a baby, and when he grows older, he will be as brave as the rest. Yes, he is only a baby, replied the king, who had overheard them. All will be well soon. Yet as he spoke, he sighed, and the men looked at him in silence. The years passed, and Sam had become a tall, strong young man, kind and pleasant. He was loved by everyone. During his father's hunting parties, he was rarely seen in danger, but he was too well liked for anyone to complain. When the king holds the great feast and declares him his heir, he will stop being a child. The people murmured, just as they had before. On the day of the ceremony, their hearts beat with joy, and they called to one another, "It is Sam whose chin rises above the heads of other men, who will defend us against the robber tribes." A few weeks later, the villagers woke to discover that during the night their herds had been driven away and their shepherds taken into slavery by their enemies. The moment had come for Sam to show the courage expected of a grown man and lead the warriors of his people. But Sam was nowhere to be found, and a band of avengers but thus set out without him. Several days passed before he returned, head held high, telling the story of a lion he had tracked to its lair and killed at the risk of his life. A little earlier, his people would have greeted his tale with enthusiasm and believed him without question, but it was now too late. "Sam the Coward!" cried a voice in the crowd. The nickname stuck. Even the children shouted it at him, and his own father did not spare him. Finally, Sam could bear it no longer. He resolved to leave his native land for another country where peace had reigned since the dawn of time. Early the next morning, he slipped into the king's stables, chose the gentlest horse he could find, and rode north. Sam never forgot the terrors of that journey. At night, he could hardly sleep, frightened by the wild beast that might be hiding behind every rock or bush. By day, the distant roar of a lion made him start so violently he nearly fell from his horse. A dozen times he was on the point of turning back, but it was not the fear of mockery that stopped him. It was the dread of being forced to join their wars. So he pressed on and felt deep gratitude when the walls of a city, larger than any he had ever dreamed of, rose before him. Straightening himself to his full height, he rode proudly through the gate and passed before the palace, where as usual the princess was sitting on the terrace roof, watching the bustle of the street below. "There is a gallant figure," she thought, as Sam, mounted on his great black horse, skillfully made his way through the crowd. She summoned a slave and ordered him to approach the stranger and ask who he was and where he came from. "O princess, he is the son of a king and heir to a country near the great river," the slave replied upon his return. At this news, the princess called for her father and told him that if she were not allowed to marry the stranger, she would die unwed. Like many fathers, the king could refuse his daughter nothing. Moreover, she had already rejected so many suitors that he feared no man would ever be good enough for her. So, after speaking with Sam, who charmed him with his good humor and pleasant manners, he gave his consent. 3 days later, the wedding was celebrated with unmatched splendor. The princess was very proud of her tall, handsome husband. For a time, she was content to spend her days with him under the palm trees, listening to his favorite stories or amusing him with tales of the customs of her own land, so different from his. But soon, this was not enough. She wanted others to be proud of him too, and one day she said, "I almost wish those Moorish brigands from the north would come and raid our towns. I would love to see you ride at the head of our men, driving them back to their homes. How happy I would be if the city rang with tales of your deeds." She looked at him with love as she spoke, but to her great surprise, his face darkened, and he answered hastily, "Never speak to me again of Moors or war. It is to escape them that I fled my own land, and at the first word of invasion, I will leave you forever." "How funny you are!" she cried, bursting into laughter. The idea that someone as imposing as you could be afraid of a Moor, but you must never say such things to anyone else, or they might think you are serious. Not long afterward, at Tailna din Lorn and Rud, while the people of the city were celebrating a great feast outside the walls, a band of Moors who had been hiding for several days carried off all the sheep and goats grazing peacefully on the slopes of a hill. As soon as the loss was discovered, several hours later, the king ordered the war drum to be beaten. The warriors gathered on the great square before the palace, trembling with rage at the insult. They demanded immediate revenge and begged Sam, the king's son-in-law, to lead them into battle. But despite their cries, Sam never appeared. Where was he? In a cool, dark cellar of the palace, crouched among huge clay jars filled with grain. His wife found him there with a heavy heart and tried with all her strength to make him feel shame, but in vain. Even the thought of future danger and contempt from his subjects seemed nothing compared to the risks of the present. "Take off your coat of mail," said the princess at last in a voice so stern and cold that no one noticed. "Give it to me, along with your helmet, sword and lance." Glancing fearfully from side to side, Sam removed the gold-inlaid armor that belonged to the king's son-in-law. Silently, his wife took each piece and fastened it firmly upon herself, without even glancing at her tall husband, who had retreated into his corner. Once the last buckle was fastened and her eyes were lowered, she went out, mounted Sam's horse, and gave the signal for the warriors to follow. Although the princess was much smaller than her husband, she was tall, and the horse she rode was also larger than the others. So when the men saw the gold-inlaid coat of mail, they had no doubt that Sam had taken his rightful place, and acclaimed him loudly. The princess bowed in response but kept her visor down. Spurring her horse, she galloped at the head of her troops and charged at the enemy. The Moors, who had not expected to be pursued so quickly, barely had time to form ranks and were immediately routed. The small troop of horsemen returned to the city, where everyone snatching the praise of Sam, their leader. As soon as they reached the palace, the princess handed the reins to a groom and disappeared up a side staircase, allowing her to reach her apartments unseen. There she found Sam lounging on a pile of mats. He lifted his head anxiously when the door opened and looked at his wife, unsure how she would react, but he had no need to fear harsh words. She simply unbuckled the armor as quickly as possible and ordered him to put it on at once. Sam obeyed without daring to ask questions. When he was ready, the princess told him to follow her and led him onto the flat roof of the house. Below, a great crowd had gathered, cheering enthusiastically. "Sam, the king's son-in-law, Sam, bravest of the brave. Where is he? Let him show himself." And when Sam appeared, the cheers and applause redoubled. "See how modest he is. He leaves the glory to others," they cried. Sam merely smiled and waved his hand without saying a word. Among the immense crowd gathered to honor Sam, only one person did not join in the praise. It was the princess's youngest brother, whose sharp eyes had noticed details during the battle that reminded him far more of his sister than of her husband. Promising secrecy, he shared his suspicions with the other princes, but they laughed at him and told him to go dream elsewhere. "Well, well," replied the boy, "we shall see who is right. But the next time we fight the Moors, I will personally mark our commander with my seal." Despite their defeat, a few days later the Moors sent new soldiers to steal cattle. Once again, Sam's wife put on her husband's armor and led the avenging column. This time the fighting was fiercer than before, and in the thick of the battle her youngest brother approached and gave his sister a slight wound in the leg. At the moment she paid no attention to the pain, which she barely felt, but when the enemy was routed and the troop returned to the palace, a sudden faintness came over her and she could scarcely climb the stairs to her apartments. "I am wounded," she cried, collapsing onto the mats where he lay, "but do not worry, it is really nothing. Just give yourself a slight wound in the same place, and no one will guess it was I, and not you who fought." "What?" exclaimed Sam, his eyes wide with surprise and terror. "Can you imagine? I would accept something so pointless and painful. I might as well have gone to fight myself." "Ah, I should have known," replied the princess in a voice that seemed to come from far away. But as quick as lightning, the moment Sam turned his back, She thrust a lance into his bare leg. He gave a shrill cry and staggered back, more from shock than from pain. Before he could say a word, his wife had left the room and gone to summon Dicht, the palace healer. "My husband has been wounded," she said when she found him. "Come quickly and treat him, for he is weak from loss of blood."
She made sure several people heard her words, so that all day long people gathered before the palace door asking for news of their brave champion. "You see," remarked the king's elder sons who had visited the chamber where Sam lay groaning, "you see, wise little brother, that we were right and you were wrong about Sam. He truly went into battle." But the boy said nothing and merely shook his head doubtfully. Only 2 days later, the Moors appeared for the third time. Although the herds had been moved to a new and safer place, they were carried off as before. For, the Moors said to themselves, "The tribe will never expect our return so soon after we were so soundly beaten." When the war drum sounded to gather all the fighters, the princess rose and went to her husband. "Sam," she cried, "my wound is more serious than I thought. I can barely walk and could not mount a horse without help. Therefore today I cannot do your work. You must go in my place." "What nonsense!" exclaimed Sam. "I have never heard of such a thing. I could be wounded or even killed. You have 3 brothers. The king can choose one of them." "They are all too young," answered his wife. "The men would not obey them, but if you really do not want to go, you can at least help me saddle my horse." And Sam, always ready to help as long as there was no danger, agreed without hesitation. The horse was quickly saddled. Once this was done, the princess said, "Now ride to the meeting point outside the gates. I will join you by a shorter path, and we will switch places." Sam, who loved riding in peacetime, obeyed. Once he was firmly in the saddle, his wife gave the horse a sharp lash, and it bolted through the town, past the ranks of waiting warriors. At once, the whole city was in an uproar. Sam tried to rein in his mount, but it was useless. A few minutes later, they found themselves in close combat with the Moors. Then a miracle occurred. Sam the coward, the sly one, the fearful one, once cornered with no escape, felt a force awaken within him, and he fought with all his strength. And when a man of his stature and power begins to fight, he usually fights brilliantly. That day the victory truly belonged to Sam, and the people's cheers rang louder than ever. Upon his return, carrying the Moorish chieftain's sword, the old king embraced him and said, "Oh, my son, how can I ever show you how grateful I am for this splendid service?" But Sam, who was good and loyal when fear did not possess him, answered frankly, "My father, it is to your daughter and not to me that thanks are due, for it is she who turned the coward I was into a brave man." The old king looked at his daughter with pride and wonder. From that day forward, Sam fought beside his wife in every battle, no longer out of fear or trickery, but with true courage in his heart. The princess had not only won a husband, but had forged a hero. And so Sam the coward became Sam the brave, and the tale of the wise and fearless princess who awakened courage in her husband was told throughout the land for generations to come.